I'm Sandor Nagyszalanczy, contributing editor for Woodworker Journal magazine, and I'm thrilled to have just completed this Art Deco style cabinet, which I designed to be an elegant yet highly functional piece of furniture. You can find my article on how to build the cabinet in the Small Shop Journal section of the March-April 2014 issue. The piece features a very user-friendly double-decker pull-out that rides on full extension drawer slides, which are black to harmonize with the cabinet's ebonized trim. To make the design less boxy, I made all four sides of the cabinet curved and covered them with a series of half-round slats that interlock to allow for side-to-side wood movement. The slats are supported by curved rails that form the frame of the cabinet as well as the front of the pull-out. To give all the curved pieces an even and precise radius, I made a special router jig setup that I also used to shape the top's curved edges. Let me show you how I did it, step by step. The first step is to create a base for the jig from a scrap of 3/4 inch plywood or MDF and clamp it to the bench top. Next, I screw on a 3/4 inch plywood stop strip that's centered and aligned perpendicular to a center line drawn down the middle of the base. To mark a curved line on the front and back rails, I set a beam compass to a radius of 22 inches. After marking the midpoint on one of the rails, I set it against the stop strip, first centering it, then temporarily secure it with a piece of masking tape. I made a T-square-like pivot strip out of a couple of plywood scraps marked with a center line that aligns with the base. I position it approximately 22 inches from the rail, then clamp it in place. I now position the compass so that its pencil is flush with and centered on the edge of the rail. Then I press its point into the pivot strip's center line. After marking the radius, I untape the part and take it to the bandsaw for trimming. I carefully trim the waste off of the rail, cutting about 1/16 of an inch outside my marked pencil line. After realigning the rail on the stop strip, I temporarily secure it with a couple of tiny nails driven with a pneumatic pin gun. To trim the rail to final radius, I use a straight bit chucked into a plunge router. A spiral-fluted bit is a must, since part of the cut runs against the grain of the wood. Next, I mount a circle jig on my router. This one's a microfence jig, fitted with longer rails and a circle attachment. I now use a metal yardstick to set the distance between the edge of the straight bit and the center of the jig's pivot point to exactly 22 inches. With the distance set, I tighten all of the circle jig's adjustment knobs. I drilled a centered hole in my pivot strip to fit the circle jig's pivot pin. I set the pin into the hole, then move the entire router jig and pivot strip until the inside edge of the router bit is flush with the outside edge of the pencil line on the rail. Once I've clamped the strip to the base and bench top, I'm ready to route. After switching the router on, I plunge the bit just deep enough to go only about 1/32 of an inch into the jig's base. I lock the plunge, then slowly swing the router through the cut. I pry the trimmed rail off the jig's base with a chisel, then carefully trim off the small nails left protruding with a pair of diagonal cutters. Once the front and back rails are all done, I repeat the entire trimming and routing process on the side rails, resetting both the beam compass and router circle jig to a 14-inch radius. You can use this same router jig setup to accurately shape the curved edges of the cabinet's top, with only a few small alterations in procedure. Start by marking the center line on the underside of the top, both lengthwise and widthwise. Extend the center line marks to the edges of the long sides, using a square or saddle gauge. To mark the radius on the shorter sides, set the compass's point directly into the top, on the center line. To provide a pivot point for the router circle jig, I drilled a centered hole in a thin strip of masonite and set the jig's pin into the hole, gently tapping it into place. With the strip properly positioned for the trim cut, I clamp it in place and proceed to route the edge. I route the top's long edges using the T-square pivot strip and the same procedure I used to route the curved rails earlier.